So there's about a 90% chance, maybe even 95% chance that Dragon Ball will be back on television at some point in the future, most likely within the next year or so, maybe year and a half or so. Dragon Ball will be back. And based on the fact that the film that's coming out this December has the Dragon Ball Super label and not just Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z, leads me to believe that they're going to be sticking with the Dragon Ball Super brand name going on, in the future. And that would make me think that if Dragon Ball does come back, it will be called Dragon Ball Super. Now, I want to have a discussion with y'all real quick about why Super will be different this time when it comes back and why it will be better. Now, in order to have this discussion, I have to go back to some of the problems that Dragon Ball Super had behind the scenes that I haven't covered in quite some time. We've talked about it briefly, and I am planning on doing an entire video once we get some more information about what really went on behind the scenes, because a lot of the stuff that I have right now is rumor and innuendo, and a lot of it is stuff that hasn't fully come out yet about what's going on with Super. So until we have more interviews and things like that, then I'll go ahead and do like a fully, heavily edited video, with graphics and like pictures and things like that for y'all, about what really went on. But here's what I can tell you. So let's go back to 3 years ago, April of 2015. Resurrection F had just come out in Japan. Big, huge hit, whether or not you like the movie. Tremendous amount of hype for this film. Frieza was coming back, which at the time was a big deal. We got new transformations for Goku and Vegeta, which would end up being their de facto transformations for the majority of Dragon Ball Super. And even though the movie has its problems, it was still a big hit in Japan. And then later on that summer, it came out in other parts of the world. Now, Dragon Ball Super was announced in April of 2015. Really, really early in the theatrical run of Resurrection F. The announcement happened and the series began in July of 2015. Now, if you remember, the first 2 episodes of Super looked great. I mean, it was fantastic. They were beautiful. They looked like movies almost. And then when we got to episode 5, there was that huge collapse in the animation production team. Everything fell apart, and we saw a lot of stories come out after that episode because of that episode. Some of them were over sensationalized and some of them weren't. The good stories were the ones that were, kind of, I guess, out there from people like Thomas Romaine, who's an animator in Japan. Also, there was that story about how Toriyama was very displeased with Super, which was a few months after that or a few weeks after that. The story of that was great, but there was also a lot of very bad coverage. Most notably, websites like Kotaku that pretty much took a lot of the really bad in-between frames and made this big clickbait article about how Dragon Ball Super has terrible animation, this and that, when really it was just like that one episode, and there were more that came after. But when you look at Super episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 4 looks a bit weird, 1 and 2 look great, 3 looks okay, 5 is the one where the problems are, right? But they really made it seem, and it wasn't just them, other websites, that Super looked like crap from start to finish, and a lot of Dragon Ball fans just never gave it a chance until much later. And that's the thing that sucks about bad journalism with these shitty websites, is that they don't really give you the whole story. Well, anyways, the story is that when it came to Dragon Ball Super, the first 2 episodes, they had plenty of time to develop them. They had time, but the schedule for the series was a complete mess, and that would lead to production problems as the series progressed. Now, by the time we got to the Universal Survival arc and a little bit of the Trunks arc, these problems had pretty much been minimized. There were still a few episodes here and there that had weird animation, but for the most part, everything looked great, and the production had finally, been centered. And the issue with the animation is one big reason as to why Super kind of started out wrong. It was a rushed production. They had just got done making Resurrection F, and they had to go back in there and start making a weekly series. Now, Toei Animation in the 90s versus Toei Animation now is a very different company. One of the big reasons as to why Super is not on the air right now is because they're going to be putting a lot of focus on making the movie look good. And in order to do that, they have to shift the focus away from just them working on Super, because there's just no way that Toei Animation can do Kitaro, One Piece, and Super all at once. They had to put one on the shelf, and they chose Dragon Ball because they knew that Dragon Ball would be able to come back in a bigger way, which is what I'm going to get to here in a minute. I want to get to my point here, but I want to give you all the backstory first. So, basically, now they're working on the movie. Now, I know some of you guys are wondering who know about Dragon Ball. You're like, well, wait a minute. Back in the 90s, when Dragon Ball Z was being produced, there were 2 movies coming out per year, and the series was running at the same time. All those 13 Dragon Ball Z movies from back in the day before Battle of Gods, like the Broly movies and Janemba, all that stuff was produced while Dragon Ball Z was still on the air. So you had animators within Toei working on both the movie and the TV series at the same time. Well, understand that the company's very different now than it was back then. The great teams that were around back then, a lot of them have moved on to other projects. A lot of them don't even animate anymore. It's just a different era now. Toei has really strung itself very, very thin. You know, they're really overworking a lot of people over there, from my understanding, and it's getting to the point where the production for Dragon Ball Super has fallen apart, both visually and creatively. You know, whether or not you love Super, and I do miss it, you know, it's still a series that we could all watch together and enjoy, but there are some writing problems. And even if you love Super, you have to admit that there's at least, you can't tell me that you don't think there's at least 1 or maybe 2 writing problems in the series. There's a lot more that we've been able to kind of pick up on and dissect and things like that throughout the past few years. But even if you're a super fan, a super fanboy or fangirl, you know there's at least 1 or 2 things that bugged you. You have to admit that. Now, that being said, a lot of that has to do with the fact that there is no original manga from Toriyama. You have Toriyama giving Toyotaro and Toei bullet points, and then they take that and they adapt it into a TV series. So because Toriyama is not hand in hand working on these things, there's no like original source, and that's why you have different writers for different episodes giving their own vision of Dragon Ball, which leads to a lot of inconsistent storytelling. You know, you have plot points that get dropped in the next episode because the new writer either didn't get to read the previous script or didn't get to really put focus on what the previous writer had wanted to put focus on. This kind of stuff happens all the time in the comic book world, and it's happening in Dragon Ball. So the big issue here is they need to have a consistent, you know, showrunner, somebody besides Toriyama who can really direct these writers. And with the hectic schedule and things that went on, it just became more and more difficult. So one of the things we can look forward to when Super comes back is better animation and better writing. Now, I know some people are probably wondering, well, is it going to look like the movie? Because, you know, in the movie you have those, if you've seen the trailer and all the images that have come out, you've got the new kind of character designs, or not the Yamamuro designs. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. I can't predict the future on that, but I can tell you that as far as fluid animation, as far as like big problems like what happened with Super Episode 5, they're going to try to either minimize that or completely eradicate that when Super comes back. So you're not going to have a problem like that happen. I mean, you might. I'm not going to say you won't, but they're going to try to fix it by planning the series out much better way ahead of time. You know, this series, whether it starts in April or in June, is going to have 6 to 9 months of planning, maybe even more than that, before it even comes out. Whereas Super, they only had 3 months. They literally came to that decision right as Resurrection F was coming out. So just imagine how hectic it is. You guys have to remember, these shows take a long time to produce. An average episode of Dragon Ball Z would take 2 months. See what I'm saying? Like 2 months, dude. Movies would take longer. So it's like that with Super, in that it takes about 4 to 8 weeks, depending on when in the series. It's still a long time, and so they have to plan things out better, which is why you saw some bad writing and, you know, some. And again, there's probably still going to be some bad writing because Super doesn't tend to really pay that much attention to like the little things, which I wish they would, but they don't. But I'm hoping that whatever team comes in now to work on the series in the future, it's going to look better, it's going to feel better, it's going to sound better, hopefully, and it's going to be written better. So there is that to look forward to. So even if you are watching this and you didn't like Dragon Ball Super, you know, it let you down or whatever the case may be, I think it's still going to be worth coming back and watching, you know, the new Dragon Ball Super next year or whenever it comes out. And also, I feel like most Dragon Ball fans, even if they didn't like Super and if they stopped watching it, at some point they will watch it because it's Dragon Ball. Like, you kind of have to watch it. And Super does not have that reputation that GT had, where some fans have never even seen GT. I know hardcore Dragon Ball fans. I mean hardcore fans who have all the toys and, you know, every DVD and Blu-ray ever, and they've never seen GT. You know, with Super, though, I feel like the majority of Dragon Ball fans have or will see it, and then that way they can get ready for the return of Super when it does happen. So either way, I'm just making this video to let everybody know that things are going to be different when the series comes back. They're going to be better when it comes back, and there is that to look forward to. I couldn't tell you any ideas as far as what direction the story's going to go, or as far as, you know, what's going to happen. I don't know yet. Once I find out, I'll tell you, but at least we'll know that the storylines and the plots and whatnot should be better, and the animation certainly will be. Certainly will be. That's it. That's all I have for you today. Just wanted to drop that little talk to give Dragon Ball fans something to look forward to. Remember just to hit the subscribe button and notification bell if you have not, so you can be notified when I upload. Thank you so much for checking out this little discussion thing. Leave your comments down below. What are you most looking forward to with Super coming back? And we got a lot more to discuss in the future, so I'll see y'all very soon.